space that we work in now is so transactional. And I mean, there's still some great programs out there. And I mean, but with the oversaturation of providers and treatment programs, that's like one of the first conversations when someone is reaching out for help. I mean, they're not even diving into like what are some of the challenges that you or the family are facing. It's almost like right out of the gate, it's like, well, what insurance do you have?
Partner betrayal is disorienting, heartbreaking, and results in absolute confusion for the betrayed partner. You worry that nothing in your life was real, and you fear that you will never be able to trust your spouse or yourself again. Well, welcome to the Rebuilding Trust podcast with Carol the Coach. I'm Carol Jurgensen-Sheets, aka Carol the Coach, and what I can promise is that when you listen to my podcast, you'll begin to believe that there is hope. We will be hearing from experts all over the world who specialize in problematic sexual behavior, sex addiction, and infidelity. Together, we will be asking them the hard questions about how you both can rebuild safety, find strengths, grieve and mourn what you had, what you never had, and what you fear you will never find again. The truth is that rebuilding trust is possible, and I am going to show you the steps to working together to build a whole new marriage based on the honesty, authenticity, and transparency that your marriage deserves. Rebuilding Trust with Carol the Coach.
Well, listening audience, I have a special guest. She's actually a friend and a colleague of mine, and we were talking about the needs of this community. And Amy, you have just been such a staple in the world. I mean, you have done everything, and we hear that you were going to develop a concierge service for our listening audience so that they didn't have to trudge through this landmine field by themselves. I said, Amy, please come on the podcast so that I can let other people know about this service. So first of all, will you give them a little background on yourself so that they know they're in good hands?
Absolutely. Carol, thank you. And thanks for having me today. I'm very honored to be your guest. AIM Behavioral Health Advisors has kind of been, I think, a natural step from where I've been. And I don't know that I've been as great as you touted me just a moment ago, but I've certainly been around for quite some time. And I've certainly worked across almost every facet of the behavioral health field. And so I kind of, as I started thinking about this, I thought, wow, I'm coming up on like 20 years in this space. And I'm like, where did the time go? Because I started just kind of grassroots close to home, and soon found myself after a couple of years traveling all over the country, trying to help folks navigate, particularly, I would say, higher level of care challenges, right? I mean, what we're seeing, I think, across the behavioral health landscape, really what prompted me taking my experience in the field. And I think one of the gaps that I was seeing was that obviously there's a lot of providers out there. There's almost an oversaturation of us that are out there in the space, and I think it's become very overwhelming for clients and families to try to vet different programs and kind of know what questions to ask and what steps to take. And so I took all of my experience over the last 20 years of working across the country and working with professionals like yourselves and families and clients, medical providers, other treatment programs. I mean, I have definitely had multiple touches across the space. And I thought of all of that, where can I do the most good? Where can I take my strengths and the things that I think I do well? And that's really where AIM Behavioral Health Advisors came from, is that it was that I think all of us that work in this field have a servant's heart to some
Mm-hmm.
degree, right? We want
Mm-hmm.
to help people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of where it started, was just, let me continue to help people, but in a very involved, high touch place. That's what I wanted to do.
So I'm going to tease you because when I heard that Amy Smith from the recovery community was taking her passion and putting it where she saw there was a needed, uh, there just had been such a big hole, such a gap in services. We tell people, yeah, call, blah, 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 and find out if you can get in or get an intake done or if you're suitable. And truly, when you came up with this concierge service so that you can help our clients, you called it AIM, right?
I did.
AIME.
Correct.
But I saw it as Amy.
Correct.
Yeah. So I said,
Yeah.
wow, this is great
Yeah.
that Amy Smith has created a concierge service that is our capital letters AIME, right?
Well, it was funny. I kind of went round and round with my daughter about this because I wasn't sure that I didn't give her a lot of parameters. The only thing I suggested when we were starting this venture was I wanted it to start with an A. And there was some thought behind that, but I wanted it to start with the letter A. And so when she came up with AIM, um, I sat with it for a little while, but I didn't really associate it with my name at all. So thank you
Okay.
for pointing that out. I did like that it started with an A, and I liked that AIM is a very directive type word, right? Aim. You're aiming at an outcome or a goal or a change, and my work that I have done really throughout my entire career has been very focused. It's been very directive toward the client and the family. That is
Mm-hmm.
really where my focus has always been, regardless of any programs that I may have been associated with or what kind of relationships that I was able to forge. It really has always been, my aim has been the
Uh-huh.
clients and the families that I've been able to help. So yeah, it's a little tricky on the name, but after sitting with it for a while, I like it.
I do too. And I love all the synchronicity of it. It is your name, Amy. It does talk about aiming, and that's a metaphor for laser focused help. I love that you brought up that it is for the client and his or her family, because you and I know, and we've talked about ad nauseum, that when somebody goes into a treatment center, an intensive, when they get a higher level of care, sometimes the family members get left out. And you have always been an advocate in this community for the recovered and his or her family. And, that's what I've so appreciated about you. That's why I've used you. And so tell us a little bit about why you call this a concierge service.
Very good. Thank you for asking that. I'm going to be very, very transparent in our
Mm-hmm.
talk today.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think at some point I was always doing concierge type services to the relationships that I had built. I mean, to your point, if Carol called me and had a need, I was high touch, accessible, ready to be that point of contact, break down any barriers that may be in place, and really, really work to get whomever is on the other side of this challenge where they needed to be. So I
Mm-hmm.
think in some respects, I've always had that concierge approach, but I am finding in the field today, and this may get me in a little bit of trouble, but it has become so transactional. The space that we work in now is so transactional, and I mean, there's still some great programs out there, and I mean, but again, with the oversaturation of providers and treatment programs, and really, truly, almost a, forgive me for saying this, but almost like a brokering of insurance. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it's almost that's like one of the first conversations when someone is reaching out for help. I mean, they're not even diving into like what are some of the challenges that you or the family are facing. You know, it's almost like right out of the gate, it's like, well, what insurance do you have? How are you going to pay for this? You know,
Mm-hmm.
and we lost the focus of a lot in a lot of ways of working from a place of a servant's heart, right? People
Mm-hmm.
don't call us necessarily when they're having great days, or at least they don't call me. You
No,
know,
exactly.
they don't call me when they're having great days. And I wanted to get away from that. Almost in some ways it can be cold and transactional. And we're dealing with human lives, human beings who are struggling and sometimes in crises, right? A lot of times when my phone rings, it's a crisis situation. And I really want from when you ask me the concierge approach, I really want them first and foremost to know that they are heard, that they're seen,
Mm-hmm.
and that I am going to help them at every step of this process through I walk with them. So like for instance, I'm going to give you an example. I actually am working with a family right now out of the Indianapolis area, and uh, they have a 15-year-old son who is struggling and has been struggling for quite some time. And what I have been able to do for them, I think, is remove a lot of the stressors that they are faced with. And what does that mean? That means as we look at his history and we look at what his care plan has been, I'm trying to, first of all, build a long term plan of care for this young man, not just a 30-day stay somewhere in a residential program. That's where I also was seeing a lot of folks drop off, is, you know, after they had admitted into higher levels of care. So the first thing I'm doing is I'm looking at a long term, built out clinical plan for this young man's ongoing health and journey. So it's very long term, right? Secondly, I'm handling all of the admissions, contacts, all every aspect that's involved in maybe moving a family member or yourself into a long-term higher level plan. I'm handling all of that. The family's not necessarily having those initial conversations outside of clinical assessments and such. And then I avail myself to these clients and families 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. If they need me, call me. And then I become the point of contact between whatever level of care that the client is in and the family. And
Mm-hmm.
so usually initially I'm working with folks for no less than 90 days. But it does tend to go farther than that because I'm also helping them build those aftercare plans for whatever that may look like.
That makes so much sense. And we are finding that there are people out there that they want that kind of personalized care. You know, you said you're working from a steward's heart, and I see you as being an advocate for the system,
Oh,
and you're willing to do what it takes to make the journey as easy as possible, because putting somebody somewhere for drugs, alcohol, sex addiction, is a traumatic event until it happens. And then oftentimes, at least with the families that I work with, it's a relief. The person
right.
is in a safe place. They're off the streets. They're not acting out. They're getting healthy. They're getting clean. And that leaves a family feeling so much relief. However, there are other stressors they're dealing with, like what happens when they get out? Will they revert back? Will they relapse? And what I hear you saying is you're going to navigate with them the best facility, the highest level of care that you can get them. You're going to do the financials. You're just going to be the go-to,
Yes.
totally advocating for them, but you're going to make sure they have a solid, rock solid treatment plan so that they don't get lost once they get out.
Right. Because I think that's kind of been what I was seeing after, 20 years in the field, is that really it's almost like I say there's certainly a place for residential for all issues. And I've always worked in that space. I mean, that's my passion. That's one of my passions is, residential care and higher level of care needs. But what I was seeing was that a lot of times these families and clients on the other side of the treatment journey, if you will, the higher level of care, that's really where rubber meets the road, right? You're right. You've got your family member, your kid, your spouse, wherever in residential, you've got a little bit of breathing space, but I'm still working with that family during that residential stay, right? I'm maintaining contact. I'm telling them what they need to be doing, making suggestions on next steps, and really helping them build that bridge, so to speak, because it is a bridge that you have to build, right? And for most folks who are struggling with behavioral health issues, I mean, these are lifelong journeys for a lot of us, right? They're not a one and done. They're not it becomes part of life for some. And having a good, if you will, advocate, having someone who is knowledgeable of the space, who has vetted programs and knows, and let me be very clear, Carol, my network is small, right? I'm not working with a whole lot of folks, a whole lot of programs. I keep a very small circle, but I know where to go when the need arises. And then again, I think just being that that point of contact, that advocate for the family and the client is like you said, it's traumatic enough, right? There's crises there. And if you can give them a little bit of peace and a little bit of breathing room through this journey, and they know that they don't have to necessarily worry about this detail because I'm going to take care of it. AIM Behavioral Health Advisors, that's what I'm here to do. I think it really clears some space for them, like I said, and allows the client that's in care to have an advocate on the outside.
And so how do you see behavioral health care being different from mental health care?
Well, I mean, I probably use them interchangeably, behavioral health, mental health. I think for someone like me who has had the opportunity to work across all aspects basically of mental health, if you will, or I mean, I tell people often, it's anything from addiction, substance use issues to truly primary mental health concerns like bipolar, schizophrenia, ADHD, whatever. I mean, sex addiction, eating disorders. I do a lot of work. So really, I don't know, like I kind of put all of that in under this umbrella of behavioral health. Did I answer your question? I mean, like, I'm working across all facets of our field.
Yeah, and so you are working with somebody who may have a dual diagnosis, and they may have, post-traumatic stress disorder, and they may have substance abuse issues, and they may have impulse control issues like compulsive problematic sexual behavior.
All of it. All of it. I mean, I see all of it.
So do you see people that hold their secrets tightly and are very, very private about their behavioral or mental health needs?
It's funny. This has been one of my big soapboxes, if you will, throughout my career. Is I've always challenged the notion that why is behavioral health, mental health, not held at the same level as our physical health, right? Because we're all one system, right?
Mm-hmm.
If the brain's not on board, the body's going to feel it. If the body's not on board, the brain, it's one system. So I've always been big on advocating for breaking down stigmas around these issues because and all we have to do is turn on the TV or read the papers or go online, and we see mental health is an ongoing growing challenge across our country. I mean, and across all ages. I mean, wow, when you talk about no discrimination, there is no discrimination when it comes to this stuff. So I think a lot of times there's still a stigma around these types of issues, and particularly among certain family systems. I mean, there's a lot of shame, I think, still associated with these types of concerns. And or you take, sometimes it can be the behavioral health or mental health problem itself that's creating that. If you've got a high performer who's a perfectionist, who's used to, kind of powering through these types of issues, I mean, that in itself can lend to some of the reasons why folks, don't talk about how they're feeling or what's going on between their ears.
Yeah, I would agree 100%. Now, let me just ask you something. Again, to our listening audience, I'm talking to Amy Smith, and Amy has created AIM, capital A, capital I, capital M, capital E, and that's a concierge service for people in need of mental health and behavioral health treatment, whether that be individually, intensives, residential. She does it all. And Amy has lived a life of destigmatizing what many, many people are afraid to talk about. And she just made the point that the more successful you are, oftentimes the more you hide your secrets because you don't want anybody else to know. Do you think it's possible that the traits that make someone highly successful are the same traits that can damage one's mental health?
Absolutely. I mean, I think I see this often, particularly with professionals and that I've worked with is, again, it's that laser focused, driven type personality that doesn't really pause to check in with yourself and say, how am I feeling? How is my mental state through all of this? Am I exhausted? I see a lot of burnout, particularly among very successful people. So those very traits that make them successful can also flip the script sometime, if you will, and create some mental health challenges for them. And I think striking a balance is really what we're all trying to do, right? We all just want to be in balance, in mind, body, spirit, I think. And so yeah, I see it often. I also see it in young adults and adolescents who maybe come from a background where mom and dad are high performers, highly successful, and then there's this, whether it's real or not, it's just the environment, so to some degree, that the kiddos have this pressure and this and can often be walking around with a lot of shame that they're not as good as, or they're not pleasing mom and dad, or so absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Well, again, you work with all ages, and you work with all types of populations, any kind of behavioral or mental health issue that there is. And I said earlier, you found this gap. How can people get a hold of you if they want to talk more about your concierge services and more about their own needs?
Absolutely. I would love folks to visit my website.
Ah,
I would love folks to visit my website. It's a pretty inclusive site. It allows you to actually set up a private consult with me for a few minutes, just to, if you want to do an introductory call. And then obviously it breaks down the different levels and services that I am able to provide to clients and families. That website is www.aime, AIME, B as in boy, HA, behavioralhealthadvisors.com. So AIM, behavioralhealthadvisors.com.
okay. So that's what she'd encourage you to do. Go to the website first, sign up for a small consultation to talk about what you need. And, many people have been through this system once, twice, or maybe even 3 times. When you deal with addiction and mental health issues, it can be reoccurrent or it can take a while to get it. There's nothing wrong with that. That's sometimes the journey. And so if you haven't liked how it's happened in the past, if you wished you had had a strong warrior, an advocate, or a servant's heart, Amy may be that person that will make all the difference, not just in getting into a facility or a treatment program, but also the care you get while you're there. I know for me, Amy, I insist on some check-ins and some staffings. And that usually means that I will get a facility to start including the other person more often. Because
Absolutely.
they get laser focused too, and they do it their way. But when encouraged, the good news about these places is oftentimes they also want to impress us. They want to make us happy as professionals who are referring. And
Sure.
you've got such a good relationship with so many facilities and treatment programs. Even though you said you keep it small, I
Yes.
suspect it's not nearly as small as they might.
Well, right. You know my history, and yes, you know that I've been fortunate to have some outstanding relationships across the industry. So, and of course, some of those, like yours and mine, are quite precious. But yeah, I mean, I think I really think that for the long-term success of clients and families that are struggling with any types of behavioral health concerns, really having someone to walk with them, advocate for them, know the questions to ask, when to ask them. And really, I always tell folks, sometimes it's kind of like, you remember the Batman show, and Batman had the bat phone,
Mm-hmm.
the bat phone. Well, I kind of have the bat phone, right? I mean, like, I know, who to call, when to call, what to ask. And in turn, again, it's really just about helping clients and families.
Mm-hmm. Well, I so appreciate you and your work. I'm talking to Amy Smith. Again, her website, let's see if I can remember it by heart. Capital
H
AIMEBCH
B BHA
.com. And as she
AIM.
says, come look at that website. It's beautiful, and it's waiting for you to get more information about the next step to personalized care. And that's why she calls herself a concierge. Amy, keep me posted. I'm just so glad you're out there advocating. You are a warrior. I'm always impressed. And it's so funny because I had a session, I actually had 3 with the same family, 2 hours with the couple, and 1 hour with the father and daughter. And,
Yeah.
we were kind of doing some family service work where the daughter could understand what had happened to the father. And I had made a referral out to Eddie Caparucci.
Hmm.
And one of the things the husband told his wife, and of course, the father told his daughters, I am working to develop a servant's heart.
Oh.
And when I think of your heart, I see servants, and that it may sound like I'm saying service, but I'm saying servants.
Mhm.
Servants. It means somebody is putting the other person ahead of themselves and making sure they're well taken care of. And so, Amy, I wish you the best. Anybody's in your hands, they're in the right hands, and continued success.
Carol, thank you so much for your time. I'll look forward to staying close and appreciate you as well so much. Thank you.
You're welcome. We'll talk soon.
Sounds good. Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.